There is a question buried underneath American history that most people never think to ask. Not who founded the nation, not who settled the land in the centuries before that, but who was the very first human being to ever stand on American soil, before any civilization, before any record, before any memory of it being done. Who were they? Where did they come from? How did they get there? And what did they find when they arrived on a continent that no human being had ever set foot on before? For most of the 20th century, scientists thought they had the answer. They were wrong. And the real answer, which is still being assembled from footprints and fragments and genetics, is stranger and more contested than almost anything in the history of human science. For decades, the dominant answer was a people called the Clovis, named after a town in New Mexico where their distinctive stone tools were first identified in the 1930s. The Clovis people were considered the founding population of the Americas. The evidence was compelling. Their tools appeared across North America in a remarkably consistent layer of archaeology that dated to approximately 13,000 years ago. The theory was clean and satisfying. A group of hunters from northeastern Asia crossed a land bridge that connected what is now Siberia to Alaska during the last ice age, when sea levels were low enough to expose a wide corridor of land, and then moved southward through a gap between two massive ice sheets into the interior of North America. The Clovis first theory, as it became known, was not just a hypothesis. It was the established scientific consensus for approximately 50 years. It was taught in schools, it appeared in textbooks, and it was almost certainly wrong. The crack in Clovis first appeared at a site in southern Chile called Monte Verde, far, far south of where the first Americans should have been if they had crossed through Alaska only 13,000 years ago. Archaeologists working at Monte Verde found evidence of human habitation that dated to at least 14,500 years ago. If people were in southern Chile 14,500 years ago, they had to have reached Chile before that, which means they had to have entered North America before that, which means they were in the Americas before the Clovis people were supposed to have arrived. The Clovis first theory could not account for people being at the bottom of South America before people were supposed to have reached the top of North America. More evidence followed. In 2021, researchers announced the discovery of fossilized human footprints at White Sands National Park in New Mexico. Dozens of prints, clearly human, preserved in ancient mud at the edge of a dried lake. The footprints were dated to between 21,000 and 23,000 years ago. This was not 13,000 years ago. This was not 14,500 years ago. This was during the last glacial maximum, the period when ice sheets were at their most extensive, and the supposed ice-free corridor through which the Clovis people had traveled did not yet exist. Whoever made those footprints in New Mexico 21,000 years ago did not come through an ice-free interior corridor. They could not have. The ice was still there. They came some other way. The leading alternative is the coastal route. Rather than walking through the interior of the continent, the first Americans may have moved along the Pacific coastline, island hopping, and fishing their way down the western edge of North America in small boats, following the kelp forest ecosystems that stretched from northeastern Asia all the way to South America and provided consistent food sources year-round. This route would have been available much earlier than the interior corridor, would explain why sites at the southern end of South America predate sites in the interior of North America, and is supported by genetic evidence showing that some of the oldest Native American lineages are found along the Pacific coast of both continents. The problem is that this coastline is now mostly underwater, submerged when sea levels rose at the end of the last ice age, which means the evidence for the coastal migration sits beneath the ocean. The genetic story has added further complexity. Modern genetic analysis of Native American populations confirms that they all ultimately trace their ancestry to populations from northeastern Asia. But the picture is not one single founding migration. It appears to involve at least 2 and possibly 3 or more separate waves of migration from Asia into the Americas, arriving at different times through different routes, mixing in different proportions across the continent. The people who made those footprints in New Mexico 21,000 years ago may have been an entirely separate population from the ancestors of all modern Native Americans. A population that arrived early, spread across the Americas, and then was largely replaced or absorbed by later migrations. A first wave that the genetic record barely preserved. What archaeology now suggests is this. The Americas were not entered once by one group at one specific moment. They were entered repeatedly by different groups, from different starting points, at different times, across a period that may span tens of thousands of years. The search for a single first American, a single founding figure at the origin of an entire hemisphere of humanity, may be the wrong way to frame the question entirely. There was no first American in the way there was a first fish to swim into a lake or a first bird to land on an island. There were people moving across a landscape that had never seen people, generation after generation, not knowing they were first, not knowing they were finding something no human being had ever found before. They were just moving, as humans always have, toward the next place that might have food, water, and safety. They happened to find a continent while they were at it.